行こうさよおわて平和よどや
Hi, John.
Hi, Gwen.
Mask from. I love it.
Gwen, this mask is actually from the 2011, the 5th Taikai, Worldwide Uchinanchu Taikai in Okinawa. I see part of a minsa on your mask. Could you explain your mask?
It's really a wonderful mask, and I just happened to get it today from Naomi Oshiro. She made it. It's pretty nice. Can you see it?
I can see that. And I can also see that you're wearing a lovely lei that looks like origami.
Yes, it's origami lei made by a student of mine some time ago, a Portuguese guy that I really appreciate that he took the time to make the origami and string it together. So these are butterflies. And you know, butterflies are abundant in Okinawa.
Very, very meaningful. Great lei to have on today.
So do you think we can speak with our masks on, or what do you think?
I think it's appropriate that you and I are not sitting next to each other. In case anyone was wondering, we're sitting far apart. I'm hiding my messy office with this shoji screen. But again, it's safe for you to take your mask off, Gwen.
Okay, and you too, John. Hai tai gusio tsuga nabira. Wanne Fujie Gwen yaibin. Dondi yuta sarugutu unigi sabira. I just greeted you in Uchinanchu, the Okinawan language. I said, hello, everyone. How are you? My name is Gwen Fujie, and I'm very happy to meet you, though virtually. I'm coming to you from the Hawaii Okinawa Center here in beautiful Waipahu, Hawaii. My grandparents immigrated from Oroku, Goeku, and Yomitan-sun in Okinawa. So joining me tonight, as you just saw, is my good friend Jon Itomura, the Executive Director of the Hawaii United Okinawa Association. John?
Thank you, Gwen. Haisai gusuyo, wanne Itomura yaibin. Utashiku unige sabira. Hello, my name is Jon Itomura. My ancestral villages are Chatan and Ishikawa. And for the past several years, we've commemorated Irei no Hi at the Hawaii Okinawa Center with hundreds in attendance. However, due to the pandemic all over the world, and here in Hawaii, our primary concern, of course, is the health and safety of our attendees. So we're glad that you're all able to join us as we commemorate Irei no Hi online this year. Thanks to many helping hands, including Facebook, YouTube, and of course our HUOA website. So mahalo ipe Nishiyama Deebiru for joining us. Irei no Hi is officially recognized only in Okinawa to remember friends, relatives, ancestors, and others who perished during and after the bloodiest battle of the Pacific War. The battle began on April 1st, 1945, when 1,500 ships attacked southern Okinawa with no less than 45,000 shells, 33,000 rockets, 22,000 mortar shells before landing over 180,000 men and That's 75,000 more than landed in Normandy on D-Day. So General Ushijima committed suicide on Mabuni Hill on June 23rd. In under 3 months, 1/3 of Okinawa civilians lost their lives, and those who survived lost their precious homeland. I'd like to thank Ryukyu, Koten, Afuso-ryu, Ongaku, Kenkyu, Choichi Kai, Hawaii, led by Masanduu Murata sensei, for the opening song. The song that they played was a wartime song entitled Nakagusku Hantamai Bushi. Masanduu sensei leads over 200 students, past and present. He has 3 Shihan master instructors, 5 certified instructors, Kyoshi, and over 100 Magodeshi descendant students. Tonight, he'll be joined by Shihan Shan Sadaoka, Kyoshi Jun Uente Nakama, Lisa Sadaoka, and John Hewitt. In 2018, right after performing his solo show at the Hawaii Theater, Afuso-ryu members from Hawaii and on the mainland traveled with National Living Treasure, Choichi Terukina, all the way to perform at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., and Carnegie Hall in New York City. Masanduu sensei and Afuso-ryu senseis will return for another live performance later in the program. Nife Deebiru to Masanduu sensei. Gwen?
75th anniversary of the end of the Battle of Okinawa. The prefectural Peace Museum monuments list over 240,000 names of those whose lives were lost in the battle, including Japanese and American soldiers. 146,193 of that number were Okinawan civilians. In our video clips today, you will see the Peace Museum monuments, scenes of the horrendous destruction caused by the war, as well as some beautiful scenes of modern-day Okinawa. You will hear from civilians who miraculously survived and from those who helped them, our Nisei soldiers. It is truly an honor today for Jon and I to bring this remembrance to you.
At this time, I would like to introduce our HUOA president, Ms. Lynn Miyahira, to welcome you to tonight's program. Lynn is the daughter of our 1990 HUOA president and former executive director, the late Wayne Miyahira. I'm sure Wayne's smile is looking over us. He had an unforgettable smile, and he must be so proud and beaming with pride as he watches over his very enthusiastic and capable daughter, Lynn.
Haitai Gusio and aloha. On behalf of the Hawaii United Okinawa Association, I'd like to thank you for taking time to join us today for Irei no Hi. On June 23rd, every year in Okinawa, the Battle of Okinawa Memorial Day, also known as Irei no Hi, is commemorated in schools, community centers, and especially at the Peace Memorial Park in Itoman. It's a very sober day in Okinawa, but it's a very special time that everyone comes together and reflects. So today's theme is reflections, Irei no Hi in Hawaii. And usually we'd be all gathered at the HUOA Okinawa Center and we'd have hundreds of people here to commemorate this day. But due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are here virtually with you today. And I'm actually really excited about the worldwide audience we'll be able to reach because of the virtual nature of our show today. So today you'll hear testimonials from survivors of the war. You'll hear essays that are being read by others. And you'll also have musical performances by members of the Ryukyu, Koten, Afuso-ryu, Ongaku, Kenkyu, Choichi Kai Hawaii, and Brandon Ing. And these will be live today, so I'm very excited about that. I want to thank all of the people who have helped put this video together today. There have been many hands who have decided on which programs and which videos to use from our past Irei no Hi events. All of them were special, but today you're going to see a very interesting conglomeration of all the different things that we really wanted to showcase to the rest of the world. So I hope you sit back, enjoy, learn, and educate yourself about all of the different things that happened during the Battle of Okinawa. We are glad to have you on this live platform with us today, and we hope that you continue to join us for other events that we'll be bringing to you virtually. So with deep gratitude, I want to say Ippe Nihei Debiru, and welcome to Reflections, Irei no Hi in Hawaii.
Thank you, Lynn. We're pleased to have now at this time the Reverend Shindo Nishiyama of the Jikoen Temple in Honolulu. He will offer a prayer of remembrance and a special message.
Please join me the moment of meditation in memory of all the victims of the Okinawa War in 1945. If you're able to, please put your hand together in God's show. I recite the name of wisdom and compassion. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. When I was the university student, my mother and I traveled to Okinawa together. Reason why my mom wanted to go to Okinawa that there are two elementary students from Okinawa, those who evacuated from Okinawa before Okinawa War began in April 1945. The military government assigned most Buddhist temples as an evacuation center for small children from Okinawa at the time. I understand you know well the Tsushima Maru incident. Over 500 students was killed by the US boat in attack. I recall my mother's story about the two students from Okinawa. There are two boys and they are so skinny due to lack of food when they came to my mother's temple. And one of the boys was sick due to a lack of nutritious food. Of course, not only for them, but most of the people in Japan at the time, they had no enough food, including rice, salt, shoyu, and miso. However, two boys never said any monku to my mom or complain about food. My mother told me that they woke up early morning and helped for cleaning the temple and the gardens. They sometimes show her the Okinawan dances and singing songs. They are very humble and hard-working children. After the Battle of Okinawa ended, my mother was informed by government that their parents and older sisters were killed in the beginning of Okinawa War. My mother had a hard time that how to tell them about their family as killed. My mother couldn't tell the two boys it about 2 months. According to my mother, they stayed until end of 1945 at my mom's temple and moved to the children camp. And she hadn't heard anything about them since they left. My mother's deep concern was about the children, those who lost their parents and their family during the war, especially Okinawa War. She told me that there are so many street children in the city of my mother's hometown, Omuta. They had no place to sleep and no food. Many kids, they die on the street. She used to tell me that Shindo, war creates only sadness and separation from the family. Today, we are observing the Okinawa War Memorial Service, Irei no Hi, in memory of all victims of Japan, US, civilians, mothers, children, oji-chan, oba-chan, and many other innocent people who lost their very precious and unrepeatable life. They didn't want to die. They didn't want to lose their family. They didn't want to lose their babies and children. And they wanted to have a peaceful, just ordinary life. War destroys everything in human dignity. We as Buddhists are against the war and any violence destroy all living things. Life is living together with others' life in this moment. We are all connecting together in the living of the Dharma. Listening to the Buddha Dharma, peace will be remained in each of our mind with deep respect. Now, please join me again in a moment meditation for closing meditations. Peace begins with each of us. Peace begins with respect each of our lives. Peace begins with listening of the Dharma. Buddhism is a teaching of peace and harmony. Buddhism is a teaching of respect. Buddhism is a teaching of compassion, peace in the world with wisdom and Amida Buddha. I recite Buddha's name in memory of all the victims during the Okinawa War in 1945. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu.
Thank you, Reverend Nishiyama. Now please join us for a minute in a moment of silence. All right, thank you. Next, we want to share with you a powerful message of peace by Miss Mina Kinjo. At the time of her speech in 2013, Miss Kinjo was an Okinawan middle school student. We were inspired by her words as she shared her thoughts at an Irei no Hi memorial event in Okinawa at the Peace Memorial Park.
さんは祖父の兄が家族に宛てた手紙を読み、この詩を書きました。自分と同じ年頃だったにもかかわらず、戦地に赴く自分のことには触れず、家族のことだけを気遣った内容に心を打たれたといいます。
礎に思いを重ねて、首里高等学校3年、金城美奈。月桃の花が白くきらめく頃、私はあの手紙と出会った。それは祖父の兄が家族に宛てた一通の手紙。彼の人生で家族に送った最後の手紙。第三中学校から届いたその手紙には、戦争のことは何一つ書かれていなくて、勉学に励み、家族を思いやるまっすぐな青年の心が記されていた。これから迫る黒い影とは対照的に、その手紙は温かく誠実さであふれていて、白い光で包まれているようだった。この手紙と出会った後、 私は初めて彼の礎の前に立った。礎に刻まれたその名前、ギラギラと太陽に照りつけられたその名前、指でなぞると一文字一文字が焼けるように熱くて、あなたの思いの熱さが伝わってくる。私の心に伝わってくる。礎に刻まれたあなたの名前はとても小さくてとても窮屈そうで、この文字では表せないほどの人生があなたにはあった。この文字では抱えきれないほどの未来があなたには待っていた。でも何もかも奪われてしまった。あなたが過ごしたあの島は、地図に書かれたあの島は沖縄から遠く離れていて、広大な海に囲まれている。あの遠い島から、あの広い海から、あなたはまだ戻らない。あなたはまだ戻れない。あの日から時は止まったまま、針は動かぬまま。あなたと同じくらいの年を迎えた今、私は考えている。戦争について、平和について。でもあなたと同じくらいの年を迎えても私は考えられない。遠い島で過ごすことを、家族と離れて暮らすことを私は考えるのが怖い。だけど辛い現実と向き合ったあなたがいるから、私は今安心して一日を迎えられる。明日が来るのを待つことができる。今年も時を刻む6月23日、正午に手を合わせる私の肌を柔らかな風がそっと包み込み、確かな思いがあふれ出す。あの過ちを二度と起こしてはならない。あの苦しみを二度とよみがえらせてはならない。人々の心に色を添えることができるなら、暗く沈んだ色ではなくて明るく澄んだ色で彩りたい。人々の未来に橋を架けることができるなら、先の見えない不安定なものではなくて力強く進める丈夫なものでつなげたい。そして人々の世界を一つの言葉で表すことができるなら、戦争ではなくて平和であると断言したい。67年前を生きた人々の後ろに私たちは続いている。私たちにできることは、あの日を二度と呼び戻さないこと。私たちに必要なことは、あの日を受け止めて語り継ぐこと。礎に刻まれた人々の届けたかった思い、叶えたかった願い、私たちが届けよう。私たちが叶えよう。礎に思いを重ねて。
This next performance also took place in Okinawa at an Irei no Hi commemoration. It features Derek Ichiro Shiroma Sensei, along with Wayne Miyahira. I'm sure Shiroma Sensei is watching over us. He was a sensei for Okinawa Minyo Kyokai Hawaii and the leader of the Okinawa contemporary group Urizun, which featured many of his young students as featured performers. Many of you will be touched by watching our beloved Derek Shiroma Sensei perform at the Irei no Hi commemoration event in Okinawa.
したしまうちな戦よのあわりおびんじゃすごとにわちもやまちおびんじゃすごとにわちもやまちさごの花の歌のごとやのよしごとやちもにすみて一まりんたげにでいご
Singing along with Derek was Chantel Ikehara. This next song, performed by Masanduu Sensei and Afuso-ryu, is Going Bushi, which describes how fate brings us together. Playing that song was Lisa Sadaoka on koto, Jun Uenten Nakama, and Chikako Shimomura. Gwen?
I'm happy to introduce the next segment because I feel a personal connection to Mr. Taro Higa, even if I have never met him in person. Mr. Higa's family, including his 5 children, lived in small town Kaneohe in Hawaii, where I grew up, and all 5 of his children and 5 of my families all attended the same schools. In fact, my mother was so proud that she knew Taro Higa. They had conversations every so often. She spoke so highly of him. It seemed in those days the parents of our classmates knew each other. So we would say akshamio in Okinawan, that our parents knew each other. My mother purchased an original copy of his book, Memoirs of a Certain Nisei, when it was first published in 1988. You can see how worn it is. I wish I knew then what I know now, as I would have loved to chat with my mother to find out more about Mr. Higa. So growing up, I had no idea that my shy classmate, who is probably watching right now from California, Alvin Higa's father, Taro Higa, had been a Nisei soldier in the 100th Infantry Battalion, and that he fought in Northern Africa and in the Italian campaigns, just like my dad did in the 442. Mr. Higa returned to America after being wounded twice, for which he earned the Purple Heart and the Silver Star. Soon after returning home, he was called upon by the War Department and the Japanese American Citizens League to visit all of the Japanese American internment camps all across the country to speak to especially the Issei mothers of our Nisei soldiers who fought in Europe. He traveled thousands of miles and met hundreds of Nisei and Issei. He did that, and when he found out that the Americans were planning an invasion of Okinawa, he wanted to be sent there. So he asked to be rescheduled. He spoke to the higher-ups. He told them how he could speak Japanese and Okinawan language and to please send him to Okinawa, which they did. He was very concerned about the friends and family there in Shimabuku and other parts of Okinawa because he was raised there when he was a little boy, since he was a little boy. Taro Higa is a name known in Okinawa, well known. NHK Japanese Public Television made a docudrama of his life, which was shown at our 2017 Irei no Hi. Mr. Taro Higa was responsible for saving many, many lives by speaking Uchina-guchi to that language and convincing people to please come out of the caves. Later, after the war, he took it upon himself when he was in Hawaii to urge family and friends to organize huge relief efforts for needed supplies and goods to be sent to Okinawa. And my partner here, Jon, was a great sport in 2017 because you'll see him on stage in a little while after the clip of the real actor, Gori, who portrayed Taro Higa in Senju no Chimugukuru, Compassion in the War Zone, produced by NHK Films. It will be shown in its entirety after our program this evening.
みんなさ、戦争の時さ、沖縄の人たちはさ、どこに逃げ込んだかわかる？そう、ガマ、洞窟、そうだね。アメリカ軍の中でこの比嘉太郎さんっていう人、この人が沖縄の洞窟の中で隠れてる人たちに死んじゃいけないと。アメリカ兵は捕まえてもみんなを殺したりしませんから。 私のこと信じて穴から出てきてくださいって一生懸命沖縄の人たちを助けた人なの。
警備兵より洞穴に人間が走り込むのを見たとの報告あり、爆破という最終手段に移るというのを聞いた私は自分が行こうと決心した。
No matter what, don't shoot. The Okinawans will not kill me. Please, put down your arms. Thank you.
おいおい生きて君それAnyone? Anyone in there? Tagarabimi? Tagarabimi? Oi! Iriti Kimisore! Please come out! Oi! Hagara Uibimi! Are you in there? Please, come out. Please. Ijiti Kimisore. Ijiti. Kimisore. Please, come out. Ijiti, please, come out. Please come out. Don't worry. Don't worry. Please don't worry. Nishiyama-santi, Shimabindo. Nishiyama-santi, Shimabindo. I'm Higa from Shimabuku. I went to Kisawa Elementary. I know I look like this, but I'm one of you. Do you understand? One day, Shimabuku no Higataro Yaibi, Kisawa Shogakko Achuru. Shimasanti, Shimabindo.
He was there for a long time, and then even when he came home, he was involved in so many things, besides just coming and joining our club, and things like improving Japanese American.
Wow, that was a while back. Doesn't seem that long ago. I think I was more proud of the cave we built on stage than my acting debut. But I was honored to play the part of Taro Higa. And with me on stage were the kids from HUOA Okinawa Creative Arts and Audrey Giebel. Our next guest was born and raised in Kaneohe. He's a fourth-generation Okinawan on his mom's side, and his ancestral village is Kita Nakagusku. Brandon lived in Okinawa from 2009 to 2014, and while teaching English in Okinawan elementary schools, he took it upon himself to teach Shimakutuba to reintroduce the Okinawan language to students, and continues teaching Uchinaguchi at Jikoen Hongwanji in Kalihi every Monday night. Brandon is a very talented and creative guitar and uta sanshin performer. He started writing songs about Uchinaguchi in 2011 while teaching in Okinawa. If you haven't heard his songs yet, look him up on YouTube. You'll find his songs all over, even on Spotify. He recently received his master's degree in education from the University of Hawaii. Please welcome Brandon Ing.
This song was written in a POW camp in the village of Yaka in the northern area of Kin. And in a time when Okinawan people had nothing, they made their own musical instruments out of whatever rubble they could find. So sanshin were made out of empty aluminum cans, rations left by the US soldiers, scraps of wood, and also fibers from parachute cords. And it really shows how important music is to our people, that even in the darkest of times, they felt the need to keep their culture alive through their songs. So a song like this not only captures the deep sorrow and loneliness that people must have felt, but it also preserves history so that we don't forget what the people of Okinawa had to go through.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Brandon. Before we go on, I've been noticing some great comments from people watching this live Irei no Hi. And even in Okinawa, there's a comment from Satoshi Takara, Mahalo Nui from Okinawa. And even David Kim is saying Haisai from Okinawa. But Uchinan Ju made a comment saying, war has never really ended for Okinawa. Just one war after another, one generation after another. Irei no Hi is about ending this vicious cycle. Thank you for that comment, Uchinan Ju and David Kim and Satoshi Takara. Gwen?
And he has taken upon himself to learn Sanshin, and in particular, the kankara that he just played. It warms my heart. When I think about how Okinawan people played music to brighten their spirit and use whatever they could. So I appreciate that Brandon shared the story about the kankara and about Yakabushi. It is one of my favorite songs. I hope you were able to see on the left side of the screen the translation of Yakabushi. So heartfelt. And I have to say, I'm so proud that so many wonderful people are from Kaneohe, my hometown. Brandon and John too, I believe. Well, to tell the story of a Himiyuri survivor, Mrs. Janice Suitomi is Hawaii Herald's writer and recently the editor-in-chief, is Ms. Jody Chiemi Ching. The Himiyuri story is probably one of the most recognized tragedies of the Battle of Okinawa. Hime means princess, and Yuri is lily. Himiyuri became the nickname for the Okinawa Normal Girls' School and the Okinawa First Girls' High School. Well, back to Jody. She spent a year studying at the University of the Ryukyus as a recipient of the Okinawa Prefectural Government's Scholarship for Descendants of Okinawan Immigrants. She is a student now also of dance with Francis Nakachi Sensei, Tamaguskuru Senjukai, and learns Sanshin with Grant Masanduu Murata Sensei. So here's Jody to share the Himiyuri story of Janice Fumiko Suitomi.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jody Chiemi Ching. I am a writer for Hawaii Herald, as she mentioned. And on behalf of the Hawaii Herald, I am very honored and humbled to tell the story of Janice Suitomi and her experience being a Himeyuri survivor. And on April 1st, 1945, U.S. forces came ashore on Okinawa. On the eve of the Battle of Okinawa, the Imperial Army's defense unit was already on the island and had drafted civilians into the war effort. For students, preparations involved converting the school buildings into barracks. Students, male and female, at 21 secondary schools were mobilized for the effort. Class hours were reduced, and then the students assisted the Japanese forces in building encampments and gathering food and supplies for the war. And their role then expanded, and soon they found themselves in the middle of a battle. So anticipating further mobilization of the students to work in the army hospitals, military surgeons began training the female students, like Mrs. Suitomi, the girls were between the ages of 15 and 19, and they became the nurses, known as Himeyuri or Lily Corps. And the young boys, the Tekketsu Kinotai or Blood and Iron Loyalist Student Corps, included the male students between the ages of 14, which is just a year older than my oldest son, and 19. They expose themselves to heavy bombardment daily while transporting supplies, repairing bridges, and electrical cables, and delivering telegraphs. Fumiko-san and her teachers and fellow students had no clue what awaited them. The Field Army Hospital turned out to be about 30 cave tunnels that had been dug into the mountains. A typical cave tunnel was dark and damp, and as we had seen in the video, it was about 6 feet high and 230 feet deep, lit only by candles. The walls were bare dirt and rock. As we had seen, it's very not flat and very uncomfortable. And as the battle intensified, the caves became more and more crowded with wounded soldiers who were placed on narrow bare wood planks. Each patient was given a canteen, a small dish for food, and a pot that they could relieve themselves in. So every day, Fumiko-san and the other nurses tended to their gruesome wounds, severed limbs, and mental trauma. The imperial soldiers managed the caves and instructed the nurses on what their duties were. Soldiers delivered the food in buckets, usually rice. Fumiko-san recalls making onigiri, or rice balls, to feed to the soldiers, and the nurses ate that too. Once in a while, they were lucky enough to have a little bit of vegetables. In order to stretch their supplies, bandages were changed every 2 weeks. The girls had to remove the maggots from the soldiers' wounds as part of their job. Anesthesia wasn't always available, so the Himeyuri nurses had to help restrain soldiers while their limbs were being amputated. They then had to bury the severed limbs. Fumiko-san remembers burying the dead. They could hear the gunfire and explosions right outside the cave during the day, so they waited until nighttime. And when they did go out at night, they had to work very quickly. There was no time to relax. They just focused on their work, and even at night, there was a risk of being hit by the gunfire. And their duties were so stressful, and they didn't have proper nutrition. They didn't have nearly enough rest for young growing girls, and the girls stopped menstruating during that time. Then in May of 1945, the US forces advanced toward Okinawa's ancient capital of Shuri, where Japan's army was headquartered. On May 25th, the Haebaru Army Field Hospital occupants were ordered to evacuate the caves. Some students helped patients, other students helped carry documents, supplies, and medicines in their rucksacks. They headed south, braving the barrage of cells. The combination of bombs and persistent rain had turned all the land into swamps, and she remembered corpses scattered on the ground. Severely wounded patients whose legs had been amputated crawled in the mud, trying to escape the shelling. Those who were not able to walk were given poison and left to die in the cave, perhaps out of compassion or maybe to prevent them from revealing important information to American soldiers. There were 2 gravely injured students who could not be moved. They were also given poison and left to die. Those able to continue on headed towards Ihara in Itoman, where the Okinawa Peace Memorial is now located. The civilians had taken shelter in many of the gama, or the natural caves in the area. The Japanese army that were with Tsuetomi's group ordered the civilians out of the 6 gama, so they could be converted into hospitals, into the new field hospitals. By now, most of the supplies had run out, and the caves ceased to function as a hospital. But they continued to secure food and water and still transported messages. At midnight on June 18th, the students were issued a deactivation order at the Army Field Hospital with US forces closing in. There was still heavy bombardment everywhere they looked. The students were forced to leave the caves and fend for themselves. They had worked so hard, saving the lives of many soldiers, believing in their hearts that Japan would win. So they were mortified to realize that they were losing the battle and being thrown out into the battlefield unprotected. The Himeyuri nurses suffered their greatest casualties from then on. Soon after, the American soldiers transported Fumiko-san to a refugee camp in Nago. The fighting was over, but life for Okinawan people was still a living hell. With about 100,000 people crammed into 3 camps, the unsanitary conditions and lack of nutrition caused people to either starve to death or die of malaria. Many bodies were buried in mass graves. Once Fumiko saw one of her classmates' parents. She couldn't bring herself to speak to them because she had buried their daughter in Haebaru, and she was too afraid to tell them what happened. While in the refugee camp, Fumiko also contracted malaria, and a kind American soldier nursed her back to health. She had never learned her name, but she did say, if I knew his name, I would fly to wherever he is to thank him for saving my life. Fumiko-san got word of the location of her family and left the camp to find them. It was an emotional reunion when she found them after months of not knowing if they too had survived the battle. When Fumiko-san was able to work again, she took a job in the motor pool section at the Tengan Army Base, which is known today as Camp Courtney, a U.S. Marine Corps base in Uruma City. Her job required her to get a driver's license. She became the first woman to drive in Okinawa, who turned a lot of heads at that time. Fumiko drove the U.S. military officers to their meetings. She said, I used to drive the captains and the sergeants around and waited outside the building by my car while they had their meeting. That's when all the guys came to flirt with me. That's when she met her future husband, James Isamu Suetomi, a civil service auto mechanic who worked in the motor pool in Okinawa, and he became the luckiest of all men who wanted to date her. James Suetomi and Fumiko Tamaki married and settled in Hawaii, where they raised 5 children who gave them 11 grandchildren. Fumiko adopted an English name, Janice, and even became a naturalized American citizen. James passed away in 1984, but Janice continues to live a very active life now at the age of 89. Her hobby is growing tulips in her garden, and the children and grandchildren grew up listening to her war stories. Kind but tough is how her children describe their mother. The story of Fumiko Tamaki is heartbreaking, but the story of Janice Suetomi is inspiring. While sharing her story with me, I could see how hard it was for her to relive the memories of war. So why does she do it? It's because she believes that if her story reaches as many people as possible, her wish will be granted. She says to the younger generation, please help one another so we can live in a world of peace. And she was able last November to go back to Okinawa and be reunited with 6 other of the Himeyuri nurses that had also survived, and they honored her at that time. And that was a very memorable trip for her. And although she's not here today, I would like to say thank you to her and the rest of the Suetomi family for helping to tell her story, and wish that they continue to live a beautiful, blessed life for many years to come in a world filled with love and peace. Thank you.
John, I think you're doing the introduction of Brandon.
We're going to change the program on you, Gwen. So we're going to go right into Shigeko.
You mean Shinyegima?
I mean, Shinyegima.
Okay. Okay. Well, we're all non-professional in this television thing, in this Zoom thing. So please bear with us, okay, ladies and gentlemen. Our next segment is on a wonderful man. When we asked him in 2017 to talk at Irei no Hi, he said to us that he didn't want to talk about the war. However, what he did want to do is talk about why he thought it was important to have Irei no Hi and to pay honor to the people who died in the war. Shinya Gima, PhD, was one of our legacy awardees in 2017. It is truly an honor, I have felt this for years, to know this gentleman personally through the Military Intelligence Service Organization and the Okinawa Genealogical Association of Hawaii. Dr. Gima grew up on Maui as the second child of 10 children of Shinyu and Ushigima, immigrants from Tamagusukuson. He was a public school teacher for 20 years before going back to college and studying to earn his PhD in educational psychology. He then later taught at the University of Hawaii in the College of Education. He served in the Military Intelligence Service as an interpreter in Okinawa, specifically on Kumejima Island. He currently serves as the president of the Military Intelligence Service Education Society here in Hawaii, and he can be found on Google with so many interesting stories. In fact, I spent an evening, John, listening to his oral history that the Japanese Cultural Center did of him and learned lots more things. Most recently, he was featured in this Honolulu magazine, the December issue, where they did this wonderful story of some of our veterans of World War II. And here's a picture of Shinya. Dr. Gima was a guest speaker at our 2017 Irei no Hi Memorial. So here's an excerpt from his inspiring talk.
Now, I was a member of the 308 Intelligence Service Unit. So our group, we were in the back areas, and they used our group as people to send to different units as we were needed, different areas of the island where remnant Japanese soldiers were still hiding out and still resisting. So they would ask for a couple of us to go out and help them, be their linguists. In my case, I was sent on temporary duty to the island of Kumejima. Kumejima is an island, small island, 50 miles to the west of Naha. There, the Japanese had established a small unit to run a radar unit, the Japanese Navy. But they wouldn't give up because they weren't convinced that they were losing the war. They tried to keep on fighting. So we were trying to get them to surrender without causing any problems to the civilian population on the island. What we finally did was, after the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Japanese emperor went on the air and he made a speech and he told his people, we are no longer continuing the fight. In other words, we are surrendering. And now that radio speech was transcribed, and we had copies of that speech which we were able to give to the Japanese troops on the island to convince them that the war was finally over. Even your emperor has given you orders to stop fighting. So because of that, we were able to get the surrender of those people on the island without loss of lives. Many civilians were caught up in the fighting during the war, as you saw in the film on the cave system. That's what it was, to avoid the fighting. The Okinawans were luckily, they had the caves, which were a natural part of their topology, the topography. They were able to hide in the caves. And yet, in a way, the caves became their places of dying. Because many times, American troops would force the people in the caves tough choices. Either come out with your hands up, and if there were civilians, we will help you, we will clothe you, we will not kill you. But if you're afraid to come out, you refuse to come out, many of them, of course, were Japanese soldiers, many of them refused to come out. So in that case then, the Americans had to blast the cave openings shut. So people were trapped inside the caves. So many lives were lost. On the other hand, many lives were saved by the actions of Americans trying to save them by calling out to them, like Takejiro did and Nomura did. Today, as we observe Irei no Hi, we are of one heart with the people of Okinawa. Irei no Hi is a time of bonding with them, even as we share tears of sorrow, remembering the ghastly story of the Battle of Okinawa. Uchinanchus here on the island of Okinawa and around the world can grieve and cry and remember the hurt. To be Uchinanchu and Uchinanchu at heart means to grieve deeply on Irei no Hi. Okinawan people and those who stick around Okinawans like a husband or a wife have been characterized as being mild, kind, cheerful, joyful, helpful, deeply perceptive, light-hearted, insightful, romantic, etc., etc. In other words, we're regular or normal. But when it comes to Irei no Hi, there is a feeling of sadness and a feeling of hurt that seems to be part of our psyche. To be Uchinanchu is to feel the hurt on Irei no Hi, a hurt that you can't avoid or forget. It might even last a lifetime. That's what Irei no Hi means to me. I don't know what it means to you, but to me it really is a very, very sorrowful and yet joyful at seeing survivors and hearing their stories. And Uchinanchus are survivors, if nothing else, and they're tough. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gima. Isn't it wonderful to hear from someone like him? I appreciate my conversations with Dr. Gima anytime I get a chance. Before I go into the next section, I wanted to mention that, gosh, we have somebody from Great Falls, Montana online watching us, Stephen McClary. He's sending all kinds of messages to people that he knows here in Hawaii. So aloha to you, Stephen. Also from Novato, California, Nozomi Okabe. Thanks, Nozomi, for watching us. Hi, Sai. Hi, Tai. Good to see you. In this next video, you will meet Mrs. Shigeko Nakasone. Interviewing her in her home in Holualoa on the Big Island, and meeting her family and sitting and talking story and then taping was a most heartwarming experience. Those of us there just enjoyed the Big Island hospitality and everything that Shigeko had to share with us. She has quite a story, and later on after this program, you'll be able to see her full interview. I would like to introduce her by reading an excerpt from the book that she wrote in 2018. And you see it here. It's entitled Tragedy of Okinawa from Nameless Harbor. She had many powerful thoughts in that book. She wrote, quote, "Most people who suffered in the mountains of Yambaru are gone by now. My parents, grandmother, and brother are all gone. It took me 33 years to go back to my hometown of Toguchi. No one can take away the happiness of coming home after overcoming substantial obstacles. Because I survived, I can say I can have as many rice balls, musubi, as I can handle. Now I truly understand that our ancestors meant what our ancestors meant when they said, Nuchi dutakara, life is the best treasure," unquote. There's a part in here that I also wanted to share with you that I think is so meaningful for today. She wrote, "I believe it is our mission to pledge peace. Today, people are dying somewhere in the world because of war, forced to be refugees, and many have lost their families, homes, and food supply. I truly pray for peaceful days for all these people," unquote. Such meaningful thoughts, so you can imagine how wonderful our day was to spend in Holualoa on the Big Island with Shigeko Nakasone and her family. So now, here is part of her video. How much rest did you have?
Nothing to eat. No water to find.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And no sleeping? You sit down on the ground?
Because we have to walk nighttime instead of daytime.
Oh, I see.
Daytime was hiding because the air raid.
Okay, so you're
Yeah.
resting and
Hiding, and then the nighttime we will walk and walk and walk.
Maybe you can show us on the map. Show us where, from where did you walk to Yambaru?
This is a Yomitan song. March 23, we left home, and then we just go all the way.
Oh my goodness.
This one Nago. And they pass Motobu and then go to Yona.
Oh my
here.
goodness, really?
Yeah. So 3 days, 4 nights.
3 days, 4 nights.
And walk and walk. We had a hutong because in March still cold.
Still cold. Yeah.
When we left home, my mother had 2 hutong. She carried like this, 2 hutong for us. But at Yona, we left all hutong. and then no, couldn't carry nothing to cover, no blanket. Yambaru, and then we captured at the Futami, Nisei soldiers. You know, Nisei soldiers came, and then they said, Yamaguchi no obasan, dete kinasai, tabemono takusan aru. In Japanese.
Yes.
So they use megaphone, and they're all, hiding in the cave here. So they use megaphone. So we still couldn't believe they fooling us.
Yeah.
So they came maybe a couple of times back and forth. But especially infant, the mother's breast milk all dry up, no more. That's why infant was skinnier, no milk, nothing to give them. So when we went to Kushi, my cousin, youngest one was infant. Always I was carrying. He was so skinny.
And you carry him, yeah? There you go. It's okay. Get tired. It's okay.
He was so skinny, and then my auntie tried to ask landlord to give it some kind of food, but they ignored. They didn't give. So 2 days later, he died. For what? For what? Why he died? Why he have to die? He's not soldier. And plenty our village infant, plenty died. Yeah, like that. At Ginoza, and then there were malaria spreading. And then my cousin, she was Kinuyo. She was 1 year older than me, and she caught malaria. And then when that start, every day the same pattern they do. And then when she start shaking, we go over her, not only one person, 3 of us over her, and she's still shaking. And then after shake, and the high fever. Yeah, that is a malaria. And then but no medicine, no doctor, no hospital to take care of sickness.
Yeah.
So she died with
too.
malaria. Yeah.
Such a moving story. It's always, you can just feel her memory every time you watch that interview. Our next guest is Dr. Yoki Higashiona. Dr. Higashiona has led an interesting and full life of public service. I've known him for a long time, but would like to take this opportunity to share some of his background with all of you. So he attended Takayasu Elementary School in Okinawa. He also attended Fern Elementary School here on Oahu, followed by Kalakaua Intermediate School, Farrington High School, and then getting his PhD in civil engineering at the University of Illinois. Among other things, he was a commissioned officer in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in Okinawa He was appointed by Governor Ariyoshi as Director of Transportation, State of Hawaii, and he established an engineering consulting firm and later retired in 2004. His professional recognition is too long to mention tonight, but in 1962, he received the Meritorious Military Service Medal, and in 1985, he was Engineer of the Year as voted upon by the Hawaii Engineering Council. And then in 1985, he was president of the Hawaii United Okinawa Association. Now, some of us know him as Dr. Higashiona, Director Higashiona, or just simply Rick. But many do not know that, like Shigeko Nakasone, he survived the Battle of Okinawa as a 9-year-old boy, walking almost 40 miles from Gushikawa all the way past central Nago. And for those of you familiar with the island of Oahu, they both walked the equivalent of going from Hawaii Kai all the way to Wahiawa. So Dr. Higashiona couldn't join us for a live interview tonight, so we recorded his interview a few days ago.
I was born in Okinawa on September 8, 1935. And I was attending school and was 9 years old when the war began. Early 1945, number of people lost, especially in our area, HUOA, lost their homes with fire bombs. The American planes would swoop down and drop fire bombs. And I saw my house burn right in front of us as we were hiding on the hill behind the homes. And the war, so the landing took place right here. This is Chatan. Kadena Airfield is here. Chatan is only about 4 plus miles from where I was born, Gushikawa, HUOA. The first few days, you see all these bombings. You see the planes coming in, and at night, the whole island was shelled by naval ships. So during the day, the American military planes would drop the bombs. In the evening, it's completely surrounded by naval ships, American naval ships, and they would be bombing here and there. As we proceeded up north, however, before we did that, my grandfather called all our relatives together. There were about 17 of us, anywhere from 1-2-year-old up to 70-something-year-old. And my grandfather said, we have 3 choices. Stay put where we are, but we don't know what's going to happen. Go south, we probably will be walking right into the war area, because most of the bombing we saw in the evenings, especially, we could see the fire bombs around here, not too much north of HUOA. So he said, south is in the place that we should be. If we're going to go any place, we should go north. You walk at night. And as you run away at night, you hide during the day. Why? During the day, those recon planes would come down, and if they think you have something to do with the military, if the military happens to be close by, you're going to be bombed on, or you're going to be shot with machine gun. So my grandfather said, we're only going to walk at night. So we left HUOA. And along the way, you would see as we walk at night, you see the bombing taking from the ship. You see the bomb going over your head, and you can hear it. And then boom, it drops 50 yards, 100 yards from you, or maybe further in. So the minute the bomb goes over your head, you better hit the ground because you don't know where it's going to hit. And that happened all the way. And then we came to King Ginoza area. And wherever we came across farmland, people shared whatever they had. And they said, you know what, if you can dig out the potato, go and help yourself. As we were approaching near Nago, a bomb dropped. And I heard, we saw the bomb going overhead at night. And I heard the bomb drop, and I saw the dust and rocks thrown up into the air. And one of the rocks, about the size of a golf ball, hit me on my back. You know, I thought I was dying because I couldn't breathe. And my grandmother just grabbed me, whacked me on my back, and I was able to get back my air. And that maybe was the closest I came to really losing my life. And it took us, as I mentioned, weeks along the shoreline. During the day, as well, we were hiding, we try to look for watercress, wild plants. We have no idea if it's edible or not. My grandfather would say, hey, if you see the birds eat them and they don't die, you know, it should be edible. So we eat wild plants, weeds, berries, and many other things. And you really don't have much food there too. So we had to live off whatever we could find. And we had to cut all kinds of things out of the trail, and whatever vegetables or things that we think we can eat. Or you go to the shoreline at night and gather seaweeds. But you didn't have seasoning, so seasoning was the salt water. And starch is gone. All the potatoes that people had, they had shared, so no potato, no starch. In the end, we survived on eating the stalk of the cycad, sotetsu. So what we did was, you would cut the sotetsu from the bottom. Then you chop off on the top, the leaves. Then you shave off all this covering skin. And what's left is a creamish looking core. And that core is acidic. So we cut it into slabs about 1 inch thick and take it down to the water, ocean water, and let it sit there for a few days and remove the acid. Then you harvest them or collect them and dry them, and as you need, you cook them, and it was a starch substitute. Gather them and bring it back to where we were hiding. And we cook those for food. And actually, many of us survived because eating sotetsu. Then one other occasion, I think the military cavalry, the Japanese military, the horse was injured. It had to kill it. And I want to share with you that the number of people who lost their lives in Okinawa, it's in thousands. Americans killed 37,000. Japanese soldiers, 120,000. Japanese civilians, Uchinanchu, Okinawans, about 130,000. And the names both the American, Japanese, or any other nationality, like for whoever lost their life in Okinawa, their names are shown in the wall down here called memorial, peace memorial wall, and their names are inscribed on it. And I do have 3 of my relatives' names there: my father, my great-grandmother, and my youngest sister. Irei no hi, historically, it points out the only thing that would happen after the war, people gonna suffer, or during the war, people gonna suffer. And people gotta learn that war is not something that you should take it lightly and get involved. You know, that's how I feel. Be aware of what is going on, not only in your family, in the city you live, in the state you live, in the country, but also be aware of what's going on in the other countries. And the only way human beings can live together without going to war, they gotta have a way of communicating. Communication is very important. And not only communication, but also understanding the other culture is very important. And we are, you cannot live, in today's world, we depend on each other. So you can't just pick up the sword or gun and start fighting. It's not like 200-300 years ago. And compared to World War II, today we are more so, we gotta be careful. So, and Okinawa created a culture almost like Hawaii. You know, the Yuimaru. Hey, let's hold hands together, help each other. And it's almost like Hawaii's culture, Okinawan culture. But there are some differences. So, yes, we need to know each other. We need to know that they are human beings. Just because the color is one color, it doesn't mean they're not human beings. So there, I think, young kids now, they have to really study about history, culture, sociology, so they can get along with people throughout the world. Again, Hawaii is like US. Hawaii is to US. Okinawa is to Japan. We should create that kind of culture.
Good answer.
Wow, hearing both Shigeko Nakasoni's words and Dr. Higashiona's words just tells me that it's so important to heed the words of those who actually lived through the Battle of Okinawa. And it's actually an amazing opportunity that we are still able to get the life experiences from someone that was there.
John, it just impresses me so much. You know, we know a lot of different people, but when you really find out their backgrounds, it's just amazing. And what a life story of Rick Higashiona. I listened to it, it's just so compelling, and his message in the end, so important, isn't it?
Yep. Amazing amazing. I mean, tonight is just flying by, just watching and listening to all these messages. I can't believe that, we're getting close to the end of our program.
Yes, I thought we would go overtime, so I actually crossed some things out, John. But it looks like we're right on schedule. I wanted to share that there is a Shikina 77 that made a remark, beautiful message for all of us from Dr. Shinya Gima. So, Dr. Gima, if you're watching, there are people complimenting you on those wonderful words that you've said. So, I think at the end of this evening, if we could all take a moment to just take a breath and think about how powerful all of these messages were for tonight. Yeah, John?
Correct. I mean, and Linda Kamihara also commenting, saying that, Dr. Higashiona hit it on the nail, or, on the head. I mean, just square. I mean, you just, again, it's probably because, he's been there, and he's lived it. He sees life as it moves, and we have to heed words from our ancestors as well as our elders.
Yeah. Well, are we into our final words, John?
Yes.
The evening. Okay. Oh, Chikako Nago, I see, gave us a thumbs up. So thank you, Chikako. Well, ladies and gentlemen, friends, family, and young people, I hope also are watching tonight, and Kupuna. I want to say thank you. We want to say thank you very much for allowing us into your homes to remember this important date in our history. I believe the purpose of this day is not only to remember how destructive and painful war can be, and how, as world citizens, we must do everything in our power to avoid it. It is to remember also the resilience, the courage, and the spirit of Okinawan people. As humble island people, they have gone through very difficult times throughout their entire history, and yet they have remained positive in spirit and in hope. They laugh, they sing, they dance kachashi. Those of us who have been to Okinawa and been with our relatives, though they have been through hard times, they are all like this, dancing kachashi and singing and inviting us to their homes and having lots of good food for us to eat. They do all of this as they continue to hope for peace and sustainability of their homeland. So there is very much to learn from their stories, and especially from what we call their chimugukuru. Chimugukuru is an Okinawan word that stands for heart, spirit, and soul. It's a beautiful word, and we love to use it. During this time of crisis around the world, with the coronavirus pandemic, the racial unrest in America, and in other parts of the world, more than ever, I believe we need to learn the lessons of the past from our ancestors and to drum up our own chimugukuru. It has been a privilege tonight for us to recognize and honor the land of our ancestors and our family and friends in Okinawa on this, their Memorial Day. I've learned through life experiences that gratitude changes everything. So if, like our ancestors, we can find the smallest thing to be grateful for, the smallest thing. When I think about how they scrounge around just to drink water, and they would drink from rainwater on the ground full of mud, and they're grateful for that. They can keep their spirits going. So if they can do that, so can we. We can get through. When we think of gratitude, changes everything. So, my friends, I want to say to all of you, I have my mask ready to go on, and this is my beautiful Okinawan mask to please stay strong, stay safe, stay in good spirits. And with that, I'd like to say thank you. And Jon, you're next. With great gratitude, mahalo and aloha.
Mahalo, Gwen. As always, so eloquently put. You know, General Ushijima took his life on Mabuni Hill on June 23rd, 75 years ago. But the battle did not end on that day. Many Okinawans were shot, committed suicide, died of illness, or starved to death for weeks following that day. So we hope you were able to reflect with us, taking this journey through the stories and the music of the past, sharing moments from the memorial programs held here at the Hawaii Okinawa Center over the years. In this 120th anniversary of the Okinawan immigration to Hawaii, I hope that these reflections will inspire us to remember and share in the spirit of Ichariba Chode and live with strength, courage, resilience, and gratitude. Exactly what we need in this most challenging of times. We're bringing back Brandon in. Brandon's love for Okinawa, Okinawan language, and music is inspirational. He recently released his first album titled Tichi, so look for it on iTunes, Google Play, Instagram, and Spotify. In addition to his master's degree in education, Brandon studied at the Okinawa University for Cultural Performance Arts. He is a member of Ukwanshin Kabudan, who does many great things for preserving and perpetuating Okinawan heritage and history. And he married an Okinawan girl from Argentina. And lucky for myself and HUOA, his wife, Karo Higa, is now a very valuable member and employee at the Hawaii Okinawa Center. For his final song, Brandon will share another special song that describes the resilience of the Okinawan survivors titled Kampo no Kuinu Kusa, means people who survived the bombardment in the Battle of Okinawa.
Okay, as Jon mentioned, this next song I'm going to share is entitled Kampo no Kue no Kusa, and basically it translates to the uneaten leftover scraps of the battleships. It was written by a man named Kobin Higa and made famous by his daughters, who formed the Okinawan music group Deigo Musume. And that was actually his second family because he lost his first wife and son. They both perished in the war. So the song is based on his feelings and experiences of those times. So if you can imagine, during the Battle of Okinawa, about 1/3 of the population was wiped out. The island was flattened by bombs and fighting between the Japanese and US forces. For those who were lucky enough to survive, they probably really did feel merely like scraps, leftovers of this horrific war. And if you weren't aware of the meaning of this song, it might actually sound kind of happy because of the melody and the rhythm. And that gives us a sense of hope that the people had, that they would one day be able to put their lives back together. So today we are observing Irei no Hi to remember the atrocities that the people endured. But the truth is they are still enduring 75 years later. And one example in a very long list are the environmental impacts. There are chemicals leaking into the ground, into the water, chemical fires as recently as yesterday, polluting the air. And every year there are hundreds of unexploded bombs found on Okinawa Island, left over from the 200,000 tons that were dropped during the Battle of Okinawa. And it's estimated that it could take up to 100 years before all of the unexploded ordnance is cleared. I've spoken to people younger and older, and many of them will actually say that they don't feel like the war has truly ended for them, and they are still feeling the leftover effects of the war. So again, we must not only memorialize the tragic history as Gwen mentioned, but we must also think about how we can move forward to ensure true lasting peace for Okinawa and its people.
Thank you, Brandon. A very meaningful song. Here again to say aloha to all of you is our president, Ms. Lynn Miyahira.
I hope you found today's video as touching and inspiring as I have. It is with deep gratitude that I want to say thank you and ippe nihe debiru to all of the people who put their work together to put this video together today. Especially to our team for the Irei no Hi event, DJ, Gwen, Ron, Naomi, and John. A lot of these people have helped put together the program and thought a lot about what we would show here today. I also want to thank our performers who are here today. The Ryukyu, Koten, Afuso-ryu, Ongaku, Kenkyu, Choichi, and Brandon. We really, really appreciate you bringing some musical performances that mean a lot to all of us. And finally, thank all of you for joining us tonight. I know that this is a special event that we all want to be sharing together here, and this is another way that we're able to socially connect with each other while being physically apart. So I hope you enjoyed the show tonight. And don't forget, for those of you who weren't able to join us live, you can always watch all of our videos on our Hawaii United Okinawa Association YouTube channel, where you should click the red button to subscribe so that you can always be notified when we have a new video coming up. So again, it is with deep gratitude that I want to say thank you and mahalo. Ippe Nihei Deebiru.
Thank you, Lynn. Wonderful message. Again, yes. Thank you, everyone. Ipe Nihei Deebiru for watching this Irei no Hi from Hawaii tonight. You want to keep learning, keep sharing. One of our recent past presidents, Ford Chinen, appears to have learned something tonight. He said he never knew you could eat that poki plant. But that's the purpose of bringing us all together tonight, is to continue learning and not forgetting. So before we leave you tonight, we want to share one more special reflection. In 2017, a young and very talented Shelby Oshiro wanted to do a special Okinawan music fundraising project for the Jikoen Hongwanji Mission Temple in Kalihi Valley. She chose a very meaningful song and brought various members from the Okinawan community together here in Oahu to gather at Honolulu Community College to videotape and audio mix a wonderful rendition of everyone's favorite song, Tin Sagunu Hana. The fundraiser was a wonderful success as the resulting DVDs sold out. But after watching it tonight, if you'd like to view it again, you'll be able to find it on YouTube, and there are many wonderful messages in this song. So, I must say, though, there are certain lyrics that stick with me from this song, which are, "My heart is painted with the teaching of my parents. I'm guided by my parents who gave birth to me and watch over me. You can do anything if you try, but you can't if you don't." So again, mahalo, Ipe Nihei Deebiru, for joining us tonight in commemoration of Irei no Hi.
朝よちむにがちうちふあたら朝よちむにがちうちふあたらまことそろひとやあとやにちしばなにごとんないる